Today we're back with another podcast session, and I'm joined by Mohammed Gangat, who is a mentor slash friend through my legal career, professional degree journey. So I'm very happy and honored to have him here with us. He's a very busy man, so he's taken this time to come and speak with us today. Today we're going to be talking about Islam and mental health. I picked this topic because I think it's become such a huge mainstream issue now, and kind of the whole idea of the mental health pandemic has kind of stemmed from COVID and how extreme the situation has got, and kind of how as Muslims we can support those in our community who are suffering with mental health problems, such as depression and anxiety, and kind of get rid of some myths and misconceptions that happen quite commonly within our community, whether that be our Asian community where most of us are from, or our Islamic Muslim community around us. So I just want to start by giving a few stats and stuff. So 1 in 4 people will or have been diagnosed with mental health problems. This was a stat released by the World Health Organization. And I think it kind of goes to show that within our own community, there's going to be so many people that are suffering in silence, and we should kind of be at the forefront of this kind of support system for those around us. I don't know, Mohammed, how you feel about kind of how it's kind of become such a huge problem and how you think it's become so mainstream now.
Yeah, no, assalamu alaikum. And firstly, thank you for the very kind introduction. I'm honored and delighted to be here. But in terms of mental health as an issue or a concern, just globally and not specifically within communities, I think there's so many different factors which correlate into this pressure which builds on young people, and as a result of the immense numbers of pressures which build on the young people, they just crash. And when they crash, naturally, it means that they're going to go into a spiral, which just leads them from one thing into another, and into another. And then when we talk about it specifically in the forms of our community, the problem we have is we don't talk about it. And we are encouraged to dismiss it. We're encouraged to not talk about it, where there's no platform to talk about or to discuss it. And when there's no way to release those emotions from within your body, then there's no way in which you can recover from it. So I'm sure we'll go on to talk about all the different reasons why mental health is spiraling. But sort of as an overview, I think the biggest problem is just not being able to talk about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So I think that kind of nicely leads on to kind of our first point, which was, for me, I think a lot of mental health issues do stem from social media and kind of the expectations that we put upon ourselves, kind of seeing everybody at 18 driving a BMW and Mercedes, or at 25 they got 50k in the bank and they're married, and they're all of these expectations that are put on you because of social media. People are portraying this perfect life when really
it's a lot of the comparing as well, because whenever you look at on social media about these, especially like celebrities which are so prominent to the younger people, they look at how much they have and like how good they are, whatever, this and that, like how good they are this or how good looking they are, and then they start the problem like mainly lies when they start comparing it to their lives and themselves. That's when people start to become so much more self-conscious about how they look, because whenever they try like improve themselves, they're always going to see something else that makes them think, well, as much as I improve, I'm never going to be as good as this. I'm never going to be as good as this. It makes them diminish their own progress even more and more.
Yeah, I think there's unobtainable standards that are put on young people because of social media, and it's a challenge. It's a very new challenge because obviously our parents never had that platform or those challenges to face, because obviously they would just see each other and there was the in real life comparisons. But on social media, you are exposed to so many more people and so many more kind of people that are having the best time of their life, so they're living their best life. And I think it's very difficult for us to kind of understand that this is not a real or realistic picture of their life. And in actual fact, people are living in completely opposite environments in real life.
And at a young age, I think the parents haven't And this is not their fault, because when they were this young, it wasn't the same for them as it is for us, because obviously, because mental health is so much more prominent, because we're so much more like social media based in our lifestyle, because it's just the culture that we've now grown up in. But parents aren't as experienced, or older parents aren't as experienced or as understanding of it, which they, to a point, they can't really be, and there's nothing more they can do about it. But it's more of a thing like you have to try your best to understand it and then talk about it, because the fact that you're even trying to understand it's gonna show that you're understanding, and people like want to listen, they want to talk, and that can show like a huge difference to these standards, that unobtainable standards that we've all put ourselves up for.
Yeah, Mohammed, I don't know if you, I was going to ask you, go on.
Yeah, no, it's literally that. It's that prominence of the perfectionist nature, that everyone has this perfect, incredible lifestyle. And actually only you know, and as individuals and even as two siblings, you probably don't know how the other is suffering. And actually only you know within yourself how you're feeling and what's going through your thoughts when you see someone post about this or someone post about that, and then comparing that and contrasting that with your own expectations of what you want to achieve. And yeah, you're always told, and it's promoted, that it's okay, everyone's at their own speed of life, everyone's traveling at their own speed, everyone's doing going about their own journey. But actually, when you see yourself struggling on your journey, and then in relative comfort, you see someone else achieving everything that you want to achieve without actually even having to batter an eyelid, you're then like, well, what am I doing wrong? And those self-doubts start to creep in, those problems start to creep in. And actually it extends beyond the typical normal forms of social media, your Instagrams, your Snapchats, your Twitter. It goes into the professional networks of one of my most hated places, LinkedIn. And even beyond that, just seeing, constantly being paraded by good news, or being paraded by people's positivity or people's success, and then thinking, well, I can't replicate that. What am I doing wrong? And I think it's easy to turn around and say, well, limit your use of social media, but then there's that constant fear of missing out. There's the FOMO as it exists in our communities or in our age group. I say our age group, knowing very well Mister's going to be like, well, you're an old man. But in our age group, that, well, everyone's on social media. If you're not on social media, you're going to miss out on what everyone's doing. And that need to constantly be kept in the loop, versus how do you balance that with dealing with everyone else's success? It's not a nice place to be.
Yeah, I think it's just a toxic cycle, and social media is definitely one of the most toxic places to be on. I think another. Yeah.
I'll just sorry to interrupt, but I think the consensus here, from what I'm getting, is that you both agree that social media has a big impact. But my question is it before that? I mean, we're using social media as a reason, like it's the excuse, right? People spend so much time on it, but mental health as an issue surely must have existed prior to this social media phenomenon. It must have existed in cultures, in Pakistani culture, Asian culture, Indian, whichever culture, and then it's from an Islamic perspective as well, right? You're right to say that we ignore it, but how does that kind of fit in? Because we're saying it's social media, limit yourself. It's this success, limit yourself. But that's now. What about? I think it's something that's existed prior to here.
Obviously.
Yeah, of course.
It's just that social media is, because there obviously are so many other issues that go into why people are depressed, people have anxiety, or people are bipolar. But the social media is not only like looking at it, all the negativity from it, but why people go on it, or why people try to go to it, and how and why, and the fact that it's so much more relevant to us. It's one of the biggest factors, not the biggest, but one of the biggest, is why we brought it up first, is because it's one of those issues that need to be addressed. And it's one of those things where like young people constantly be on it, but they almost need like a reminder that social media is one of those things where you can go on it as much as you want, you can look at other people, but as much as you say, oh, I wish I had this, I wish I had, you can't do that. You have to work, hard, and sometimes you won't get those things in life, but that's not a bad thing. That just means maybe those things weren't meant for you.
Yeah, definitely. And I also think, answering on Corinne's question, mental health is so much bigger than social media. That's not the only reason, of course. There's things such as financial problems, which we're going to come on to, Rizk, all these kind of aspects. There's so many childhood trauma, PTSD. There's so many different things that contribute to mental health. But for us, as young people, that's one of the biggest contributing factors, I think, and I think a lot of young people think. In a Western society, this is the problems that we face. Of course, in, like, for example, Pakistan or India, back home, wherever we are from, they're going to face completely different issues. For example, whether that be they're trying to put food on their table for their children, or they're trying to send their children to university and having to pay for that financial weight, that financial burden on them is going to cause a wealth of mental health problems. So we're talking from a young people's perspective, but obviously from an adult's perspective, it's going to be different. From someone living in a different country, it's going to be different. But of course, there's a range of factors.
I think I think building on that, it's definitely always existed. There's absolutely no doubt. But I think what social media has done is exasperated and sped up the speed or the realization, or, you know, the cycle within which you find yourself of struggling with your mental well-being, because it's a simple fact that the self-doubts and the concerns and the stress and the anxieties, they'll exist in whatever field of life you're walking in. But with the existence of social media, it's been exasperated and sped up hugely, because of, like we've been speaking about, the comparison and the seeing of the unrealistic standards which have been set by society, if you like.
Definitely. I think another factor that has really brought to the forefront mental health is the pandemic, which I mentioned at the beginning. And also, just for another, statistic, the Center of Mental Health Organization have reported that over 10 million people will be in need of extra or new mental health support after the pandemic, and 1.5 million of those being children. So I think as soon as this pandemic and we kind of go back to normal life, the kind of consequences of it are going to be huge, and we all need to be prepared to support one another, especially in the community that we're in. Facing from the pandemic, I think a huge burden on a lot of people is the financial crisis and the financial burden upon most people, especially parents, people that have other people to provide for. And I think that has also contributed to so much mental health problems. The suicide rate is completely skyrocketed because we've got so much debt and things like that. And I think the whole essence of rizq comes into this a lot. And I think this provides a big comfort for a lot of Muslims, in the sense that whatever is written for you is written for you. And I don't know if Baba or Uncle Kashif want to talk about this a little bit more, but how rizq plays a big role in how we as Muslims see kind of what is meant for us will come to us, and kind of how do we as young people and kind of also adults who are going through all these financial stresses have that patience, have that sabr to keep going and keep thinking Allah will provide if it is meant for me, and whatever is happening to me is meant to happen. So yeah,
building on from what Misbah said, obviously, because now she's labeled the issues that adults had, or more, just adults had during the lockdown. I think I'm gonna label the younger people's issues that this could apply to older people as well. But when you were put into lockdown, it's something we never had before, because we're so used to always going out to. We all have this different routine of like going to school, going to work, seeing mates, seeing colleagues, or doing this and doing that on the weekends, or anything else like that. But then when we were all shoved into lockdown, you've broken this schedule. You are now forced to just stay by yourself in your house with your family. And sometimes your family they won't even converse that much. They'll talk sometimes, but they'll all be like, I've worked, you have this to do, because they'll be working from home. But when you're by yourself and you're in lockdown, obviously, because none of your friends are with you, and your friends are in school, especially if your close friends, have a lot of emotional support for you. When you're by yourself in lockdown, it really gives a lot of people a chance to look at themselves and adjust themselves. So it's a very two-way street for a lot of people. That it could be a great thing, because people could have been like in a great shape and they could have been fine. They could just been like grinding through it and they would have been fine. Yeah. People could have just been okay, but then once they hit lockdown, they could have started to look at themselves, but then they only start seeing the bad things. And as they're in lockdown, they get worse and worse, because no one's there to support, because everyone's so busy doing whatever and they don't want to talk to anyone. they get worse and worse, and they just go down and down and down, and the emotional support is just, it's nowhere to be seen. And I feel like that's why so many people have like such an emotional burden on themselves and such like a low self-esteem. That's why I have so much depression, anxiety amongst like our youth, especially now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Definitely.
think
Before the doctors and what have you jump in, just I mean, do you think it's because we've got this concept of success? What is success? Everyone is out to succeed. Yeah. So when you're at uni, you got to succeed. What does it mean to succeed? When you're in every walk of life, you got to succeed. It's this concept of success and its relation to us as individuals, and how we translate what this word success means is what could kind of develop, into mental health, issues in mental health, because you're not achieving this success thing that you've set yourself. So I mean, it's not only in all walks of life. It's also how we define, what we want to achieve out of life and where that comes from. So I think you're right. It's everywhere. It's prevalent. Home, work, social. So yeah, sorry, but I want to.
Oh gosh, if I think wanted to mention something.
no, you took the words right out of my mouth. I think what you guys have been saying is exactly right. That this has all been around for a very long time, and as you mentioned, social media has accelerated it in modern times. But ultimately, there's a saying, they say keeping up with the Joneses. That's an old saying that's been around for way before there was any internet, right? So it means that everyone was already envious of one another, looking out at what others are doing. I think basically, coming back to religion and Islam, Allah Ta'ala is basically telling us that, I've built you with these inherent traits, and it's going to now be your battle to fight these traits. So what traits am I talking about is going to be envy, and jealousy, same thing, pride, arrogance, yeah. And we're taught from an early age that these are the wrong attributes to have. We know envy is bad. We seek protection from the envier in the Quran, don't we? We know that arrogance is bad. In fact, Shaitan, his biggest fall was arrogance, wasn't it? The reason that he didn't bow down to us was from arrogance. And so what Allah Ta'ala is already telling us is that, look, when I've created you, you are also going to have these tendencies, and it's going to be a constant battle against the nafs. Yeah, and if you can destroy these tendencies, and you will never be able to destroy them, so you'll have to constantly fight them. And some days you'll win, some days you'll lose. But when you're losing and you're feeling bad about yourself and you're beating yourself up, not because you've done haram, not because you're not feeling guilty about doing something against the will of Allah Ta'ala. You're feeling bad about someone's got a better car than you, or more money than you, or things like that. Then actually, that's when, you guys can pick it up, but I think, what's the solution? And from an Islamic perspective, the solution is to then self-reflect and say, hang on, what am I upset about? What am I concerned about? What am I worried about? And actually, in the grand scheme of why Allah Ta'ala has put me here and what my job is here, what my duty is this actually something to be worried about or sad about? Or is this just a test, as you mentioned about Rizq? Is this a test that Allah Ta'ala has put? And really, I've just got to pull my sleeves up and pass this test, and then the blessings will come. And this is easier said than done. That's why the Quran talks about it multiple times, is that it says it. And we say, in Surah Asr, those who exhort one another to sabr. Sabr is such a simple word, isn't it? Have patience, have sabr. But sabr is, I think, one of the most difficult things to master for any person. But I think these are, these little clues that Allah Ta'ala has put in the Quran, these are actually our tools for success, for winning at mental health as well. So if we can master these tools and work on it, which is a lot of self-reflection, a lot of self-criticism, not beating ourselves up about the wrong things, but really thinking, okay, why do I behave the way I do? Why do I think like that? And it does mean being honest with yourself. But actually, what comes out on the other side is happiness, which is ultimately what we're talking about, isn't it? That's what we want.
Yeah,
I really like that. And actually, you're linking to the concept of patience is, it's really important. And building on the previous point from that as well, defining success, it's a really weird one, and it's a tough one, because actually I think you then engross yourself in this cycle. Because if we think about success, the Quran defines success as, وَمَن يُطِعِ اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ فَقَدْ فَازَ فَوْزًا عَظِيمًا, that if you've obeyed the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and done what Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam has obeyed us to do, then you have attained success. Or فَمَنْ زُحْزِحَ عَنِ النَّارِ وَأُدْخِلَ الْجَنَّةَ فَقَدْ فَازَ, that, if you've protected yourself from the fire of Jahannam and entered Jannah, then you have attained success. But in order to attain that kind of success, you have to, like the first verse, obey the commandments of Allah. But the moment you start to, when risk, the element that what is written for you is going to come for you, but you're struggling to put food on the table, or you're struggling to comprehend how someone has something which you want, or how, what you mentioned about the jealousy, the envy, the hasad, the backbiting, all of that which comes out of it, then you start to actually doubt yourself, and you start to doubt your iman, start to doubt your faith, you start to ask questions, you start to question taqdeer, you start to worry, maybe I'm not even attaining success. Forget in this world, I'm not attaining it in the next world either. I'm no good at anything. And then you fall into this really bad cycle. You're like, well, I've lost there. What's my purpose of living? And then that's when the element of patience is very difficult. And it's why, if we talk about, those examples of patience, and we look at it in hindsight and we go, yeah, I would have been able to, have patience at that time. I don't know if, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam walking out of Taif, pelted and verbally and physically abused, he was patient. Yeah, I would have been able to do that. It's not that simple. The element of hindsight, it makes a wise man a fool. Which is why there is so much virtue and so much reward in patience, but still that reward and that element of, well, you're going to be rewarded for it. It's a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's something which a lot of people, especially young people, struggle with comprehending and taking into their minds, because they're like, well, if you're just going to brush it off as, well, it's a test from Allah, let's just leave it at that. That then removes that conversation, or that listening, or that being able to talk about your feelings, which then make things even worse. So it's that cycle which we keep talking about, but it's that cycle which attacks us in so many different ways. How do you fall out of that cycle is extremely difficult.
Yeah, I feel like, well, a lot of kids don't, and I didn't understand this either, was that we're always taught that if you work hard and like you push yourself, you always achieve success. But what we didn't get was that you don't achieve it straight away. What we don't understand is that on the path towards what we want, or what we want to achieve, there's always going to be those twists and turns, those ups and downs, and sometimes the downs will last forever and the ups will last for a second. But what we always look at where we are, but not where we're going to. That's the thing. We keep going up and down, but we never try to understand that we're doing this. But each time I do this, I'm getting better and better. I'm falling less and less each time. Yeah. And each time I fall less and less, I'm going further and further towards what I want to achieve.
Yeah.
I think that's what people, younger people like me, need to think about. That's a new perspective for them to think about, because especially with self-esteem issues, they think that they should just be some way that everyone else wants them to be, but not everyone's the same way. Obviously, you can train yourself to become more fit and healthy, but it takes time. It's not a thing that comes overnight. And that's what a lot of people, because they'll take a few days to start training, but they won't see any difference. So they'll think, nothing's working, so what's the point? If you just keep going and like you don't think about like the fact that even if you don't see anything happening, if you just keep going, eventually things will start to happen. You will start to get better.
Yeah, definitely. I think the topic of patience and sabr, I was actually researching around this topic, and I came across a beautiful story of a woman who approached the Prophet ﷺ and said to him, I am struggling with all these like mental health problems, like I have a mental illness. Can you ask Allah for a cure for me? And he said, I can ask Allah for a cure for you, or you can have patience and Allah will have Jannah waiting for you. So I think it's very important for people to understand that the struggles you're going through, God is there with you, and God will reward you for the patience and the sabr that you have in the hereafter, which is kind of our goal for this life is to obtain the reward and the happiness of Allah, so that we will be granted Jannah in the hereafter. So I think that's definitely a very big part of trying to understand how to tackle your mental health issues and kind of how to keep things in perspective. I also wanted to talk about kind of the myths and how our communities view mental health. So I know quite a lot of people that will look at a person with mental health and depression and think, he's not close to Allah, he's not very religious, that's why he's depressed, or something like that. And I was listening to some Muslim psychiatrists, and they were saying they're not mutually exclusive. You can be pious and you can suffer from mental health problems. You can be so pious and God will love you so much, and you can be suffering, because God will test those who he loves the most. So I think it's very important for our community and the elders to understand that don't look down upon people who are suffering, because it doesn't mean that God doesn't love them or they're not close or they're not trying, because they might be more religious than you are. And I think it's a very big thing for people to feel ashamed, I think, and people to look down upon one another. It's very common for a parent to be like, oh, you're just being lazy, or just have a nap and you'll be fine, or your diet's bad, or something like that, and they will dismiss it. And I think this is not the sunnah of the Prophet, because actually I came across another story of the Prophet where sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he entered the masjid and he saw one of the Sahabi sitting and in the mosque on his own. And he walked past and he found something that wasn't right. And he asked him, what's wrong? And he said, I just have so much anxiety from all the debt I've incurred, and I just don't know what to do anymore. And the Prophet didn't say to him, oh, you shouldn't be feeling that way. That means you're not religious. That means you're not on the right path. That means that you're not trying. He didn't say that. He said, I'll give you a dua, I'll give you a solution, a dua, do this in the morning and every night. Because he acknowledged the mental health illness that he was going through. He understand the stress he was under. He didn't dismiss him, which is very important, because I think a lot of parents and elders in our community dismiss the fact of mental health, and they don't really value it as much as your physical health, for example. So I think we should follow the Prophet of the Sunnah and the way he approached mental health, just as we would approach anything else that he did. I don't know, Mohammed, if you have
Yeah, no, I was going to say, if you're good, shall I go? I was going to say, if something like your iman, your faith, can fluctuate, and actually it's a known fact that it fluctuates. There's a very famous incident where the Sahaba, Ridwanullah Majma'in, they were with the Prophet and they felt a very high level of iman, high level of faith. And then they were away from the Prophet, they were inside their own homes, and they didn't feel that same urge. So they run out their house, they're like, I'm a hypocrite. And then Rasulullah asked them, what's wrong? Yeah, Rasulullah, when I'm with you, I feel a high level of iman. And when I'm by myself, I feel a lower level of iman. If something like your iman can fluctuate, and there's nothing wrong with that, in the sense of Rasulullah didn't admonish him and say, oh, why is your iman not at that high level? If something like that can fluctuate, then your mental well-being fluctuating. There's nothing wrong with that. And if we're talking about stories, there's numerous stories. And when Mr. said, we'll talk about mental health, I was like, 45 minutes to an hour to talk about all of these stories about Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam during the time of the Sahaba, where they suffered from, mental well-being. I think we all know about what Surah Duha, and the purpose of its revelation was literally Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam didn't receive wahi for an extended period of time, 6 or 7 months. And this is the same Nabi who would receive wahi on a very regular basis. And he went through a period of where he was like, why is Allah not sending revelation down to me? Why is it not coming down? Have I done something wrong? He was starting the self-doubts, the anxiety, the reflection, the period of, not only was he feeling it within himself, his enemies were taunting him. Yeah, your Lord's forgotten you. He doesn't care about you anymore. He's not here for you. And then if Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, felt that period of down, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had to reveal what duha to, make him feel like, no, it's okay, I've got your back, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Surah Duha is one of the most beautiful surahs. What duha, what that actually means is, that what duha is, by the morning sun, that sharp ray of sunlight, light at the end of the tunnel and all of that. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَلْ آخِرَةُ خَيْرٌ لَكَ مِنَ الْأُولَى, that what's coming afterwards is better than what you've gone through or what's come before. And it's, we can say it would get better over time, but it gets better over time, but you have to tie your camel and then, leave it to Allah. You have to do things. You have to be proactive. You have to try and tackle what's wrong. And we can't just brush it off. And then one final story before I pass on. It's when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it's a known fact that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam buried 6 out of his 7 children. It was only Fatima radiallahu anha who he didn't bury. And even that, she passed away 6 months after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away. And the one which impacted probably Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam most was the death of his final son, Ibrahim radiallahu anhu. And the reason for this is Ibrahim was obviously he was Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's first son or first child born during Islam. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was able to do, the tahniq. Rasulullah was able to give adhan in his ear. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was able to raise him as fully a Muslim. And I think he reached around 15, 16, 17 months. And then he passed away. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam felt it. He felt it deeply, and he was there. He was crying, weeping. And it comes, I think it's Abdurrahman ibn Auf radiallahu anhu. He asked Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam out of love, because Ya Rasulullah, even you feel this pain? And he goes, yes, of course. It's because it's a mercy in my heart. It's the mercy in my heart which makes me feel pain. If you didn't feel pain, you would have no mercy in your heart. So it's okay to not be okay. And I know that statement and that, those words are said very regularly. But if Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Sahaba felt that, who are we to not feel it? I think that's the crux of the problem. That's the crux of the matter. And I think that just says everything that needs to be said.
Good.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely a great way to think about it as well, isn't it? That look at the hardships that the Prophet, peace be upon him, went before us, and the Sahaba, and all the other prophets before them, and all the challenges and all the tests. And that's why there's a dua, isn't it, that we ask that not to be tested like those before us, specifically because we're acknowledging that they were tested so hard, and that's because Allah Ta'ala knew they could handle it. We can't even handle it. So we're asking, please don't test us that high, but we are still going to be tested, and we're acknowledging that. So and the other thing I was going to say was that, acknowledging all of these hardships, coming back to what are the kind of tools to tackle this, and we've talked about some of these tools like sabr, and therefore reciting these du'as, and thinking about our self-reflection and things like that. The other thing, vital tool, which is not open to everybody, but we have to make use while we have it, is the use of family, and the use of close friends and family. And I can use that. You can use that word interchangeably, because that's how the Muslim Ummah is supposed to live. Yeah, where everyone is your brother and your sister. But specifically, there is a role for your household, and don't forget, as kids, our parents. Okay, so those of us who still have our parents, that's a priceless, firstly, it's a duty that we continue to. So it's not about seeing them when we gave their lives up for us when we were children, and especially our mothers gave everything for us, and we do that for our children. We have to remember that the parents are there, and as Prophet peace be upon him told us so many times, to go back to your parents and make sure you fulfill your duties to them. But there is a barakah in that as well, that if you fulfill these duties, if we make sure that, if not just going for the sake of it, but am I putting a smile on my father's face? Am I thinking what might make my mother happy? Not buying her a present, not buying a phone, because then I can be off and do what I want to do, but spending that time doing what she wants to do. And only you know your mother, and you know your father, and you know your brothers and your sisters, and no matter how they are, no matter what you're going through at that time, if you try and make them happy, what happens is the blessings come back to you. That family unit, that unity becomes stronger, becomes happier, and that feeds into everyone's mental health, makes everyone much stronger. And this is acknowledged, because we know that one of the major reasons why mental health is becoming such an issue, especially in the West, is happening at the exact correlation with the lack of family units. Okay, and as the family units are breaking down, single parents, youngsters are leaving their mothers and fathers and basically don't see them again, and it's become the generalized accepted culture. But this is what is feeding in to the lack of mental health. And we can give medicines, you can see your psychiatrist and things like that, but again, Allah Ta'ala is giving us the tools. Yeah, we got to use these tools, and then we'll see the benefits.
Yeah. I think Allah Ta'ala also says in the Quran, he says, for whatever disease I've sent down, I've sent a cure. So make sure you look for professional help. You should always look for professional help. And I think that is such a big thing for young people. Don't be ashamed, or even older people as well. Don't be ashamed to admit that you're struggling, or admit that you can't cope, or it's overwhelming, because at the end of the day, Allah, he pushes you to go and seek these cures, and go to the professional medical people that are trained to understand and try and help you. So I think it's definitely taking away the shame from it. Even if you're 50, 60 years old and you're struggling with anxiety and you never knew what it was before, but now you do, it's never too late to go and get help, which I think is a very important point.
I think a lot of the reason, like especially from young age to even for you guys, that when we were taught Islam at like on the baseline level, of course when you go deeper there's more to it, but on the baseline level you're taught the basic things like do your salah, do your zakat, Allah's all giving, he'll give you good, he'll give you this. But then as you get older and more of these issues start popping out, especially mental health, and then it's one of those things where it's like, well, I was taught that Allah loves me, and it's one of those things where when adults ask why don't they turn to Islam, it's like we don't know enough about how Islam helps mental health. And when they say put your trust in Allah, it's like you have to understand that as kids, or as kids, we're not as faithful, we don't know as much, so it's hard for us to put our trust in something that we haven't seen or we don't know about that much. So to say, and especially when it's so relevant to us, because when we're going through stuff like this, it can be really tough on especially like the faith as well. It can really impact it badly. So when your parents say like put your trust in Allah, sometimes it can be really like also it can be really like
disheartening.
Yeah, because it's one of those things where it's like I've tried, but I don't know how, because I can't.
Yeah.
Because I don't understand how this works. But but they don't get that, like the more Allah puts you through, it just means the more He loves you, because He know you can handle it. Because Allah once said that He will never put more on a soul than it can bear.
Yeah.
Because when He puts you through that stuff, He knows that when you come outside, you'll be stronger. So you won't have to fall through that again, or you'll come out with something better than you were before.
Yeah. I think it's definitely very important for the old generation and parents to kind of understand how to tackle these issues with their kids, because it's becoming so important now, and having that open communication and dialogue with them instead of being dismissive, kind of how we spoke about at the beginning, and taking the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ and not dismissing people's fears and anxieties and the sadness, and actually understanding, acknowledging it, and giving them solutions that can help. An Islamic solution, or pushing them and helping them to go seek professional help. I think that's also very important for us. So focusing on solutions now, I think, because we've discussed quite a few of the issues. Number one, we've spoken about professional help is very important. If you feel like you need it, please go. There's no shame in it. The Prophet ﷺ and the Quran and Allah also push you to go and seek help. I would also think, I don't know, one of the solutions I thought about was kind of the community leaders such as imams and things like that should probably have mental health first aid training or something, because they bear a lot of the weight of the community and people go to them and seek help and advice. So I think it's very important for them to kind of understand. I think many do. I've seen it on YouTube, and as I'm researching this topic, many are really coming to terms with mental health and how Islam can help. Muhammad, if you have any other solutions.
No, I think those two are, I think, very important. And I think third, and probably one of the most important ones, and I know we've spoken about it a lot, is communication. And Brother Kashif mentioned about, making use of your family and those who are willing and able to listen to you. Because I think one of the things which I've, come to terms with and, think about a lot is, for a lot of us, religion and Islam, it's an inherited concept. It's something which we have inherited. It's not something we've chosen. In life, we're constantly choosing things. And in order for us to be able to fully own something, we have to be able to ask questions about it. When I was studying, when I did my alim class, I would sit in sabak, I would sit in class, and I would, probably to the annoyance of my ustads and my teachers, I always would ask, why? That doesn't make sense. Would you mind explaining that in a logical way, in a way that I could understand? And if I couldn't find the answer, I would go out and search for it myself, because I think to be able to satisfy your why or that doubt in one way or another, I think it's extremely important. And then for for young people to just be brushed off and be told, no, we don't ask those questions, or it's just fate. You take it as given. It distance people from it. And so then when you feel that disheartenment that, well, it's a test and you're telling me that, I should just leave it in the hands of Allah, you feel that distance because you haven't got that connection. So when there's that conversation to take place, having an open and honest conversation, it's extremely important. And I think the one about family, I think it's priceless. Being able to have that open communication within your household, it's imperative. My sheikh, you always used to say, rahmatullah, you always used to say that being a sheikh inside your house is very easy. Why? Because the loyalties are very deep. Even if you're the worst person in the world, outside of your four walls, your mom or your dad or your son, your daughter, they're not going to shout out to the world, oh, my dad's like this, or my mom's like this, or my brother's like this. They're going to protect you. So if that safe environment is created, and then you create that mahal, that environment of, well, we've got a safe environment, but we have got an environment where we're going to discuss things, we're going to talk about things openly and honestly, that eases a huge amount of minds. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was always there to listen. People would come to him with all types of questions, questions which, let's be honest, imams these days would cringe about, or they would be like, I don't think I'm comfortable answering those questions. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would openly answer them and openly speak about them. And I think it's important that there's a comfort element, or there's an openness and a willingness to engage with and communicate about all things. So yeah, I think number 3, if I can add to that list, by in a long way, is communication and speaking.
Yeah, definitely. I think definitely checking up on people close to you, even if it's just a hi, hello, how are you? Don't push people to do things that they're not comfortable with, but just checking up on people is a big deal as well. Being someone that's not judgmental, I think we've spoken about quite a lot, especially people in our community that are kind of figureheads, make sure that they're not being judgmental and they're actually taking off the Prophet, the son of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and kind of being very understanding and acknowledging people's problems and trying their best to kind of answer their questions and their concerns. If anybody else has any comments,
I've got just a one before. Yeah. Your dad is dying to get in, and before he gets in, I thought, let me say something, because I probably won't get a chance after that. So only a couple of points. Misbah, I think fantastic, right? You know exactly the kind of topics we should be discussing. So it was absolutely topical. The other thing I want to kind of leave everybody with is that even as Muslims in Islam, success and competition aren't dirty words, right? It's good and healthy to have competition, and it's good to want to achieve success. Okay, how you define that success and the level of that success is what's important, right? So you should know what your limits are. If you don't work hard and gain those A levels and do that medical degree, you're not going to become a doctor, are you? So don't expect to achieve the kind of trappings that kind of life would have from that kind of hard work. Same with the deen. You want to be successful in the deen, you're going to have to work hard for it. That means put the time in. So don't think of those things as success in the deen and the dunya. There's no conflict between the two, right? They're just different kind of streams that you need to go down. And therefore, that brings you on to rizq. The concept of rizq and it being from Allah Ta'ala doesn't mean you sit at home and just do dua and the rizq's going to come to you. It takes it from, you're going to have to work hard for this rizq that you want to earn. And you may have to be competitive, right? So, but you also have to know what your limits are. And when you get stuck and when you're in that situation where you don't know what to do, you need to be able to turn to people that you know, that you trust, that you love, who also have to understand that. So me as a parent, you're absolutely right. Now, how can I address my child or wider family members' issues with mental health when I don't even understand the concepts myself? I don't understand how to help them because I've never been through it. Or I may be going through it and don't even know because I never turned to anybody, right? So I think very, very good. Jazakallah for that. I'm going to hand over to your dad now, I think, who's going to come in and
I've got no comment.
I feel I've said so much.
Just one last thing is that communication, it is, especially for young people and maybe even adults, talking this is not for everyone, but it can really talk to other people about their issues, and it can really help, because that reassurance that you're not the only one that is suffering, like, because a lot of people can feel like they're alone, or it's just them, or they're the problem. If they see that other people are also struggling, or other people, the problems are, when they help those people, it can make them feel so much better about themselves, and it can build so much relationship between people.
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely.
So just to summarize some of the points that we went through. So number one, I think it's very important to understand that social media is not real life. It is a highlights reel of what people have chosen to show you. It's their successes, their best points. It's not realistic. Everybody struggles. Everybody goes through tests. If you are feeling overwhelmed, depressed, you have some mental health issue, does not mean that Allah does not love you. Doesn't mean you're distant from your faith. And does not necessarily mean that you're not religious in any way. You didn't have strong iman. Does not mean that. You can be one of the most beloved people to Allah and still be struggling. He tests those who he loves the most. Whatever you're going through, you can get through. God will never burden you with more than you can handle. Also, we should take from the sunnah of the Prophet and the way, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the way that he approached mental health, and acknowledge that how he acknowledged it and understood it, and took his time to talk to people and ask if they're okay, and give them that kind of support, that Islamic support that they would need. As well as him himself making dua every morning and every night. And he would seek Allah's help against the anxiety and the fear he would feel through all the battles and all the challenges that he would go through. It's very important that if you are struggling, that you seek professional help. The Quran and the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and God all encourage you to seek professional help. God has not sent down a disease that he has not sent the cure down for, and they encourage you to always look to the people in your community that are professional licensed individuals that can help you. There's so many solutions. Parents need to be educated more by us, especially, and we kind of need to open the dialogue with our parents and encourage them to have these open conversations and change their minds about certain things, because our community has some misconceptions about mental health that is very discouraging to a lot of people and alienating. But I think this has been a very productive conversation, and thank you to Mohammed and Uncle Kashif and Uncle Harun, everybody here listening and watching today. If anybody else has any comments, go for it now. If not, we can close it off here.
Not even Baba can come up with something after that summary there, but I think I'll have a go. Have anything? Brilliant. Fantastic.
I was just going to say, it is very important not to stigmatize mental health, that it is just a problem with the way you feel. It definitely is an illness. It definitely is a disease. When it gets and it's trying to break up, there's your everyday highs and lows, okay, which everyone goes through, and that's what I think a lot hit on. But then it's where it starts to affect your everyday life. And that's where it starts to manifest in physical symptoms. You start waking up very early, you can't get to sleep, you start to lose weight or you put on weight, you start to make dangerous decisions or silly decisions. These can be the starts of symptoms of actual severe mental illness, okay? And it's been shown, clinically, that there's disruption in chemicals in the brain when this happens. It's a chicken and the egg situation as to what starts it what first, but certainly then it becomes a spiral, and it spirals out of control. And that's when this is a disease, just like having heart disease or diabetes or something that needs clinicians, it needs medicines, but it also needs a lot of support as well. Just like if you have a heart attack, you're not going to have an angiogram, a stent put in, and then say, okay, off you go. They're going to kick you out of hospital. You're going to need physiotherapists, you're going to need dietitians, you're going to need lots of other help before you're ready to get back to normality. Same with mental health. There's lots of medications that are, in fact, often essential to help people get past certain hurdles when they get really unwell. But that's not the only thing. It's in conjunction with all the other support mechanisms. And that's where we all have to recognize, if someone else is suffering, our duty is to support them, whether it's professionally or as a friend.
Yeah. I think that's so important to understand that mental health is just as important as physical health. Diabetes should be taken just as seriously. Was that?
Just last thing for you, because of if anyone else wants to say anything. I think one of the most the most important thing is just to not suffer in silence. I think that's why there's so many suicides within, because no one is willing to talk because they feel, I don't know whether it's that they feel embarrassed or ashamed that, I don't know, that they're the problem or that they're unproud of themselves, but that's not the issue. The issue is that you're suffering, and that's what people care about. They want to help you. You should remember that you need to see that people want to help you. People do care about you. So you should never suffer in silence, because there's always someone who will help you, who will care about you.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, I think we should close it off there. Thank you everyone for the time, and everyone putting in their points. I think it's been a really productive conversation, and it's a very small start to a very big problem, but it's definitely our responsibility to carry on this conversation and kind of play our part in helping our brothers and sisters.